We're so excited to offer this series in collaboration with our wonderful community partners to learn about the specific vulnerabilities that communities experience in relation to sexualized and gender-based violence, barriers to accessing services in our communities, and ways that we can make changes individually and as organizations to better support the needs of survivors. Avalon Center is located in Chibuktuk, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Although we are gathering virtually today, acknowledging our presence on this land is particularly important when we're holding conversations about sexualized and gender-based violence. Because historically and currently still today, violence and colonization are tools against Indigenous communities to further their oppression all across Turtle Island. We invite you to reflect on the land on which you currently reside and join us in standing in solidarity and action with residential school survivors, missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and their families, land and water protectors, and Indigenous people and communities all across the country. We're all treaty people and have an active role to play in reconciliation. We also acknowledge the connection between the land and our African Nova Scotian communities and stand with survivors of the Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children and all forms of institutional abuse and neglect. We recognize that environmental racism is present here in Nova Scotia and are committed to addressing these legacies of white supremacy in our work to end gender violence and beyond. April 2021 is the 20th anniversary of Sexual Assault Awareness Month, a time to honor the voices and experiences of victims and survivors, and to bring awareness to issues relating to sexualized violence. Everyone has a role to play in ending sexual assault, harassment, and abuse, and we thank you so much for being here today to teach us, to all of the panelists, and to learn with us, to all of the attendees. Before we get started, I want to direct you to the live closed captioning that we have available, which you can turn on by pressing the CC button on the bottom of your Zoom screen in the taskbar. A video of this panel will be available on our website, avaloncenter.ca, in the coming days. And lastly, when the webinar is complete, a survey will pop up that we hope you can take a moment to fill out. This will help us evaluate our Sexual Assault Awareness Month Lunch and Learn series and help us to plan for future events. So thank you so much for taking the time to do that. I also want to acknowledge that discussions about sexualized and gender-based violence can be challenging, especially for survivors in our virtual room. So in the chat box, I'll be posting a link to a resource that has several links to different grounding activities that may help you. And I invite you to please take care of yourself in this space and afterwards. Without further ado, I'm so delighted and grateful to introduce Deb, who is the Senior Peer Outreach Worker at YWCA Halifax, Denise, who is the Victim Support Navigator at the Mi'kmaq Native Friendship Center, Justine, who is the Sexual Violence Community Engagement Coordinator with the East Preston Daycare and Family Resource Center, and Cheyenne, who's Avalon Center's Community Navigator and who will be moderating this panel. Each of our wonderful panelists will be highlighting the experiences of Black and Indigenous survivors of sexualized violence and exploitation. So I want to thank you again for taking the time to share your experiences with us. Thank you.
I think it's my turn. It's turned over to me now.
Yes.
Like Dee said, she thanked you on behalf of Avalon. I want to thank you guys personally on behalf of myself for the work that you guys do, and how much I appreciate and value your presence here today. So
Thank you.
You know this work means a lot to me, and some of you I've had the chance to work with. So, I got to see some of the work you guys do firsthand. And so I'm happy to have this conversation. It was actually a privilege to be asked to host this conversation. So I just want you guys to know that it means a lot to me. I'm going to ask some questions. I'm going to start with Justine, and then we'll go to Denise, and then we'll go to Deb. So we can do it in that sequence, and you guys can just jump in one after another if that works for you guys. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll start with you, Justine. What are some barriers you've noticed in your work within the community access and services?
Well, the biggest issue for most of the Black communities is that services just aren't in our communities. It's starting to become better for the Preston area, but I don't think that it's the same case for other Black communities across the province. And I think a big part of that is because our communities are just getting smaller in general. So resources aren't always thinking about coming to the communities to support the people that are there. So I think that would be one of the biggest things that is a barrier for us, is that getting access to the services that are available isn't always easy, especially for here in East Preston. Like, we don't even have a transit system, yet we're considered to be in the Halifax area that we can rely on. Like, it takes like a 4-hour break in the middle of the day, only works during rush hour times. And it makes it really challenging for someone to be able to get up and go somewhere if you're not working within, the 9 to 5 schedule. For the services that are here, I would say lack of representation. And when I say representation, that looks different for every individual. So in our communities, a lot of people feel comfortable with speaking to someone that looks like them. Others in our communities don't want anyone that looks like them to, listen to them share stories or receive help. And that's because of the code of silence that we have in the Black communities. It's a blessing and a curse, in my opinion. We have a code of silence because we want to protect ourselves from the harms that have historically been there outside of our communities. But then also, because we have that code of silence, we aren't always willing to reach out and seek the services that are available to us. So I think, with lack of representation, so I may not feel comfortable to share, some of the things that I've experienced with someone if they don't look like me. And then on the other hand, some people only want to speak to people that don't look like them because there's fear of, what they share might get out into the community. So when I say representation, I think that needs to be varied. So someone that looks like me from this community, in this community, someone that looks like me that is not from this community, and someone that doesn't look like us. And then that way, people that do seek services feel comfortable where they can choose how their service is being delivered to them.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Sorry, I'm in a meeting, Helen. Okay. I gotta turn this off just a minute. Sorry.
Yeah.
Like I say, I work in the community, so community
Yeah.
members will call me at any time of day or night. And sometimes that's good, but sometimes it's not.
Denise, would you like to add on?
Sure, just to follow up with what Justine said. In my work, like I said, I've been working there for about 8 years now. And first, when I came to the Friendship Center, there was no talk about human trafficking or that kind of thing, or exploitation. There is no services in the Friendship Center to support someone that are, being exploited. And, through my work, I did a lot of networking with NSA, with YWCA. But a lot of the barriers I see is a lot of women, they fear coming forward. They fear getting help because, the Friendship Center is like the hub. We have so many programs and services. I've even noticed, like, some of the women that we might be some red flags. We try to approach them, and but they just would not, disclose anything because of the fear that their pimp or John might know that they're getting services from us. There's a lack of mental health and addiction support. As you know, a lot of our people suffer with addictions and mental health. We don't have that available that's specifically around exploitation. So, now we do have, yes, a support worker, addiction workers there, but not that specifically that addresses some of the concerns that some of these women are facing, because their needs is a lot different than, any other person that comes in. And I see, like a lot of it too is like Justina said, not speaking about it. They don't want that stigma on them. They don't want to be known, you know, like what they're going through. I see a lot of that too, you know, where we feel the more we have these conversations about what is trafficking, what is exploitation, what are, you know, our women need as it comes to addressing those. I think, you know, we can get some of these services here, but I think we need more of that at the center of where I work too. So, and again, you know, I echo a lot of things what Justine's saying there. Fortunately, we have a lot of transportation, but still, there's major issues regarding poverty, housing. You know, if, you know, in order to get them to safety, they need proper housing. You know, the crisis of housing that's here in the city, but have something that's safe for them, because a lot of these Johns and Pence knows the shelters, knows where they go. So they have eyes everywhere on these women. So they're not going to go to our fourplex. They're not going to go to our shelter or that. So yeah, so I think that's some of the barriers that I can think of offhand, Cheyenne.
Thank you, Denise. Deb, would you like to add on to what Justine and Denise said?
Well, I totally agree with both. You know, and I've seen both of those things in my community. I am Aboriginal and Black, so I get, and from both of my homes, it was like, what happens in this house stays in this house. And you knew if you carried news, you were going to get a whooping, which basically helped perpetrators to get away longer with what they did. Like, luckily for me, I was able to stay alive and be strong enough that even my old family sometimes don't want me to visit because I'll say stuff. And they're like, you know, I mean, just an example. I remember one day one of my uncles said, oh, I used to change your diapers. And I said, yeah. And I remember when I was no longer in diapers and you were still trying to get in my pants. So that's how I talk. And people are like, oh, that's that crazy one, that one that was on drugs. So don't listen to her. And I'm like, well, maybe if we had learned more about letting our young men or old men, whoever they were, to teach them to keep their hands to themselves rather than concentrating on teaching our young women how to stay safe, you know, because I found that was one of the biggest things. As I was growing up, my grandmother was like, don't go picking blueberries with the boys. Don't go here where the boys are. Don't, you know, I bought my mom a card one day and it said, in lieu of you for Mother's Day, for you, I'm wearing 6 pairs of panties today, because my mom was always like, you know, making sure that you have the right type of panties on and, you know, those kind of things. So, you know, but I think we need to start allowing things to be talked about. And I understand why not. I understand that, like I always said to people about my mental health issues, because of course I do have trauma issues that, you know, I acknowledge and I'm working on, and I probably, you know, will be working on forever. And, but I think one of our biggest things is to start at a young age of teaching our children that it's okay to talk about stuff, that it's okay to, you know, to find someone that you trust to talk about, because that seems to be an issue. And then when they do talk about it, unfortunately, it makes the victim so much the bad guy, because you shouldn't have told people. Why did you tell people that? Because it happened, you know. But yeah, I think we are getting better. You know, it is getting better. I would like to see a lot more culturally diverse representation, you know, in organizations like SANE nurses, the people that are at the emergency, the people that are going to meet you. Because like Justine said, sometimes it has to be someone to look like you, that looks like you, to make you feel comfortable enough to talk. Sometimes, but giving the option, having the option to say, would you like to see a Black social worker, an Aboriginal social worker, or, you know, or Caucasian social worker? Because some will only go with the Caucasian because they're like, they don't know my family. So it's not going to get back to my family or my community that these things happen to me, making them feel more like a perpetrator than an actual victim. You know, it's very sad when one of our young women within the Aboriginal community was killed, and everybody was so happy that she was blonde, and she presented as white because the police right away went and found this person. And I had to admit a guilt that I had when we were putting together our packages for our young women, because we do go out and do rescue packages, that I never even thought when we were putting all the stuff in the packages, these products do not work for Black and Aboriginal women. We need to buy separate stuff so that we have a bag that accommodates Black and Aboriginal women. Like and then that's what we had to do. We had to actually, but I was guilty of that. I never even noticed it right away. And then I thought, I remembered somebody giving me a care package with a comb with little tiny teeth that there was only one hair I would have been able to comb with that. But and the skin products, the hair products, all of that stuff didn't pertain to me at all. And, so when we do, if you're an organization that does care packages, remember, like, everybody's skin is not the same. And, we get ashy. So we don't just get dry skin. Thanks, Chuck.
My next question for you, Justine. What services do you believe should be offered in a larger capacity to better service our clients?
I think in the Black communities, we need to offer services that are more, as mentioned, culturally appropriate. So in our communities, it is known that we love sports. In our communities, it is known that we love music. We love arts, whether that's visual or performance. Art. And so if we can have services that come to our communities with that trauma-informed lens, harm reduction approach that offers, art classes for our young artists to come out and draw and, have that self-care option for them, where if they feel comfortable, it's appropriate environment, they can disclose or, seek advice or whatever that might look like. Maybe, in our Black communities, we often have sporting tournaments, typically basketball tournaments, but, there's a Black Lives Matter golf tournament that's, started last year and is going to continue this summer. Let's have conversations in those circles as well, so that as we're doing the things that we already love to do, we can also be healing at the same time.
Thank you, Justine. Denise, would you like to add on?
Yeah, just as you answered a question there, is that's what I find is so important to our Indigenous women, is having to address like any sexual violence or human trafficking or is to be culturally relevant, culturally revitalization and culturally safe. Some of our women are just wanting to be able to smudge, having access to medicines, having access to sweat lodge ceremonies, having access to elders. And, those are the things, like we need to see more often. We have like some elders, yes, that do the work, but given those haven't been culturally safe for them, some of the women might not be ready for that, but, give them that choice, because when they're being exploited, they don't have no choices. They don't have to say in their lives. So give them a choice if they want to go to a sweat, give them the resources, have things that I like to do is talk about, the self-care. Our women, when they're being exploited, and we know our Indigenous women, because of colonialism, because of impacts of residential school, historic trauma, our women don't see the value of themselves, don't see their worth. Long before European we come in contact, our women were valued, our women are considered sacred. But when we got, European contact, that's when the value of our women, they didn't respected our women as just as women. They were, taken away from the community as to for sexual purposes. And our women need to feel worthy. Our women need to feel, that they do matter, because that pimp and that person that's exploiting them could be a boyfriend, could be a family member. It could probably just be them down so bad where they don't feel that they're worth it, worth saving. You know, they just want to survive. They just want to get through the day. And that's going to take not just a day, that's going to take a long time, long process of working with them, building that trust. Because even if we look, you know, we're Aboriginal, it's probably still going to take some time for them to build that trust with us, because everyone else has taken advantage of them. Everyone else is probably, you know, they're going to think, oh, you're just, you know, you don't care, or you just, you know, is your job or whatever. But make them feel that they matter. You know, a lot of times our women just want to be heard. And I always tell them, you know, when they're coming to see me, that I have 2 ears to listen. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to listen to you, you know, show that unconditional love to them. You know, I know in these times, pandemic, we can't hug. I love hugging. And, you know, make them feel special. That's what I do. You know, that's what I want to do more of. And, you know, and our other services, you know, they need to be available, accessible to them. You know, if it's not the center, somewhere where they can easily get food, easily, you know, they get, you know, those services like feminine products. We have those at the center and the fourplex. You know, given those care packages, like Debbie said, you know, that's relevant to that person. I'm going on and on here because I have so many things that I want to talk about. Of course, you know, you're not, you just go with what you're supposed to do, all your heart. But that's what I wanted to address, is that our women, you know, as Aboriginal women, African Nova Scotia women, you know, we're disrespected, we're devalued, we're looked at as nothing, disposable, you know. And that's one of the things I heard reading the final report of the MMIW, you know, a lot of the stories of the families, you know, how they saw reactions from the police, you know, just make them feel worthy, that they didn't care, you know. And that's where a lot of these services from the justice aspect, we can go on and talk about that. That's a whole different conversation.
Yeah.
Changing that, you know, like our women do not trust going to the police if they need help. If it's domestic violence, it's sexual violence, reporting a sexual assault, or even to exit from, they do not trust the police. There's a lot of reasons. There's a bad history there. So we need to change that. Get them officers trauma informed, but culturally, not just a one-day training. No, you know, we have a lot of staff turnovers. They need to be trained. They need to have you know, we have so many persons of experience that are doing this work to have those conversations with those police officers, given an history of our people, you know, from the African Nova Scotia, but also our Indigenous community. This is why, you know, we are where we are, understanding that trauma, because we're not going to be able to move forward if they're only doing bits and pieces. I talked a lot.
No, thank you so much for this. Denise, this is perfect. Deb, would you like to add on?
Oh my goodness, I'm just so glad to be on a panel where the other people talk as much as I do, because usually, usually I'm on a panel trying to like do that because I feel like I'm absorbing all the oxygen in the room. And it's nice, you know, because I'm still every day learning that, you know, we have 2 ears to listen and 1 mouth to talk. And that's always been really hard for me because I stayed quiet for so long that now I just run off at the mouth all the time, right? And I know that, but it's, I appreciate it too. Yeah. Services that I think that, I mean, we do concentrate a lot on the victims. And I think one of my hardest challenges is teaching our young women about self-worth. And that you don't have to offer yourself sexually in order to get what you need or whatever. And that if someone takes advantage of you in that way, they are taking advantage of you, even if you offer yourself. I remembered myself personally being 13 and offering myself to people. So I didn't consider it being sexually assaulted because I was you know, because I needed something. And I felt like that's all I had was offering myself. And then I couldn't even tell you the amounts of people that took advantage of that because I didn't have self-worth. I didn't look at myself as being worth anything but what I could give, as far as my body at the time, because that's what I felt like that's the only thing I have. But I think what's really important is that we start educating our young men. I think that the young men, like everybody's like, oh, the women, and I agree that it's usually the women are victims, but our young men also have to learn that this is not okay. This is not okay. They have to learn even more that no means no, that standing on the corner making sexual noises when girls go by is not okay. You know, that doesn't make, you know, because I find as far as young and our Black and Aboriginal men and men in general, they're very hypersexualized too. So they feel like I've got to do this in order to look like a man for the other men. I can't have a woman talking to me in that way, or I can't, or I'm just going to try to sleep with as many women as I can, and, things like that. And so, and to learn that, teaching them that no means no. It doesn't mean maybe. It doesn't mean push a little bit harder. It, it doesn't mean twist her arm up her back, which was, very common. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means no. And also teaching our women the ability to say no and not say, well, if I tell him no, he'll go get another girlfriend. Oh, well. Oh, well. So, but I think, yeah, having those things that we have strong people in our communities that are familiar to be able to speak to them and not feel uncomfortable about their own experiences, so that they know, like, you're not alone in these experiences, you're not alone in the things that happen to you, and just because you were a child, or just because you were a woman, that, but also knowing the difference in, we don't, and I'm going from child to adult now. Even as an adult, I would have, say, a domestic violence in my home. I couldn't call the police, because I knew when they came to get my partner that the possibility of him being hurt really badly, and yes, I should have thought, good, beat his ass, he bet my ass, beat his ass, but we don't feel that way, and we know that the possibility of him being hurt or killed are so much higher within our community, that we don't want to call. We don't want it to be like, I didn't mean for that to happen. I didn't mean for them to come and chuck him on the ground and handcuff him and beat him up. I didn't want that much, right? And so that's why a lot of times we don't, and we'll suffer in silence, because we know that a lot of times, and again, the police, Denise, when you were saying about the mistrust, we do know historically how we've been treated by the police. And so we don't want to be like, even with the COVID and the parties, they're like, what else can we do if we see that somebody is gathering more than the number? What else can we do? Because the last thing we want to do is call the police, because they're going to show up with their guns and their tasers and their whatever, and it's going to turn into a worse situation. So that's kind of, that's kind of how, and learning those things. And like Denise said, 1 day training, and I saw Justine agreeing, 1 day training for any of that is ridiculous. Like, how do you, I couldn't go through everything on a 1 day training, and it needs to be a constant training. It needs to be a constant consulting thing with the communities. The communities know their people. They know the reaction of how this family's going to react when it comes time to, that when it comes time to do whatever. Also, we know that the woman is not going to go in and be treated again like she's not going to be perpetrated again on, right? Because I find that happens a lot with women of color, that we go in as a victim, but then they treat us like perpetrators of some sort, you know, like being asked to leave because we were very vocal, being asked to leave the emergency room. Who gets asked to leave an emergency room? You're there because you're in emergency, right? And you know, just because we may be, my issue a lot of times is the fact that I'm very, like when I talk, right? I'm very animated. My voice is very loud. My voice carries. So people would say that I was acting towards them in an aggressive manner, which I wasn't. So, you know, I was taught from young to cross my legs and sit on my hands, because otherwise people would say I was being the aggressor and I should leave, right? And I try to explain that in a lot of cases, us as victims don't look like what you think a victim looks like. We're not cowering and crying in the corner. We're putting our backs against the wall and we're coming out fighting. And that's what we do. That's what we do. We're a different type of victim of what you see as a victim, as what you think a victim should look like. You know, I was asked to leave a transition house once because I didn't seem broken enough to be there. Well, yes, I was broken, but I also know that showing that is like cutting your hand open when you're swimming with sharks. Come eat me, you know, I'm vulnerable. Come get me. So we don't do that, man. We just don't.
Thank you, Deb. Denise, you wanted to add on?
Oh, you're muted.
You're muted, Denise.
See? Oh my God. Just, I was thinking after I stopped talking, something came to mind, you know, like a lot of times our women there's a lot of stigma that's put onto them, you know, if they're being exploited or in a sex trade. And a lot of these services that they need, like for justice services or economic security, because they need to be stigma free, you know, even for our trans or mental health treatment centers, you know, harm reduction, things like that too. A lot of our people, you know, they are in their midst of their addictions and they're not ready to stop. But still, if they're being exploited, there's a lot of stigma that's onto our women. So it needs, those supports need to be equal access. They have the right to access these supports, not to be turned away.
Mm.
And, you know, and that's what I feel like a lot of women too, is just, they won't go to a particular health center because they might be known sex trade, for example. So I know, you know, stepping stone services, but that's how my thoughts came to Cheyenne, and I'm sorry for.
No worries at all. No worries. Thank you for sharing. We're finally to our third question, guys. What are some disconnections between service providers and community, and how can we address it and adjust our practices to better service the community?
Well, I think first and foremost is show up. I know we talked a lot about representation and how important that is to our communities, but if your organization doesn't have the appropriate representation that, you know, is ideal for the community that you're working with, at least just show up. And show up knowing that you're not coming in with like the savior mentality, like you're not coming in to save anyone, you know. Come in with the mindset of, you know, I'm going to be the passenger while you're still maintaining being the driver. I'm going to come here and find out from you what it is you want. Because as Deb said, sometimes service providers have really great intentions in providing care packages, but it's just really not what we want. So it's good, right? So when you do show up, if you don't really know, you know, how you're going to assist, how you're going to help, ask the people that are there. You know, they know what they need, they know what their community wants, and don't only show up on the negative days. So I say that in saying, you know, most of our communities have a day of celebration, whether that's, you know, during, out here we do, oh my goodness, I forgot the name of it. But we have a day, it's on July 1st, where everyone comes out to the recreation center. There's a barbecue, bouncy castle. It's a day of celebration. I know there's like a North Preston Day. I'm sure that there's like a Uniacke Square Day. Like I'm sure most communities have a day of celebration. Well, if you want the community to feel more comfortable around you, or, you know, to feel like you're a trusted ally, then show up on those days too. Whether it's, oh, you're the person passing out the drinks, you're the person that is, you know, making sure the kids take off their shoes before they get on the bouncy castle, whatever it is, show up so that, you know, when people do feel comfortable to come to you as a service provider, they've already seen you in the community, even if you're not necessarily from the community. So those would be things that, you know, if you're not from the community and you know that you're not from the community, just start showing up in a respectful way, and start asking, you know, those questions with not from a place of judgment, but from a place of curiosity, so that you can learn more about the community, more about the people that you're working with, so that, you know, you're better able to service them.
Thank you, Justine.
You're welcome.
Denise, would you like to add on?
Sure, you know, like when we do our blanket exercises for, you know, we've been doing many of those, like 300 plus, me and Debbie. And that's one of the questions we always get asked when we talk about reconciliation. Reconciliation, like what can they do? A lot of the answers that we give is like, learn about our culture, our beautiful culture, not just the dark history. Yes, they need to be informed of that history, because I know a lot of our non-Indigenous partners, they're not, they don't know about that history, and they get shocked with some of the information that we provide them. The schools, you know, they need to be more informed about the history as well. You know, come and celebrate us. You know, like we had a National Aboriginal Day. Oh, my cat. Go, cat. Go. Got my train of thought all gone now. See, hold on. True. Yeah, you know, like come to our communities. Come to our communities. You know, when we talk about the police officer used to be on the beat, they used to pop in for coffee, tea, have a chat. They don't do that so much now. So Debbie, who's on the something advisory with the police chief, she mentioned that. So now we're seeing cops on the beat just coming, but not only on the beat. Come when we have gatherings. Come and you know, serve our elders when our elders meeting. Come and, you know, participate. Be in our Maui Dodge. You know, it's all virtual now, but come and be, I don't know, do something with the kids. When I was a police officer back in the day, and I got the role of liaison with our elders, our community. I love the community piece. I love community piece. That was my baby. And I was given that. That was my part of building trust with the community, of seeing me not in a uniform. I'm a human being under the uniform. I'm also Denise. You know, I may be the one that go to your house when there's a violence, there's you know, something that's happening in your home. But I'm also a person that want to interact with the community. You know, do those kind of things as like Justine said. So reconciliation, well, we call it reconcile act.
Sorry, still in my meeting.
I love it.
I turned it off. I thought I did. Oh no, I pressed restart. Okay, there, now it's on. Sorry.
But, you know, I want to see our partners also take an interest in our culture. You know, we have such a beautiful culture, our language, you know, our ceremonies. A lot of our ceremonies are, you know, you can't record, but participate in those ceremonies. But also when we're talking about, you know, exploitation, when we're talking about sexual violence, we want our partners to show that they care, not just come in because they're getting a check mark, you know, they collaborate with an Indigenous, you know, partner. But also you know, be part of our community. You know, speak to the ones of experience. They're the ones, like we mentioned before, like, you know, people with lived experience, they know what they need. You know, let's have these conversations with our survivors, our persons of experience, to ask those questions and have these key partners, like maybe it's Avalon, maybe it's the police, maybe it's legal. Give them, you know, what is the need? What are some of the barriers they're facing? They might not be willing to share because they fear, again, if they talk, you know, like, I don't trust the police, their fear might, you know, the police might come after it. But we need to start having these conversations in our community. That's where it comes down to. You know, our community members, you know, when we don't talk about it, it's almost like you're silencing it. You're not acknowledging that it exists in our community. And we need to do this to protect our women, our men, our boys, because we know our men and boys are also being exploited.
Yeah.
You know, we need to address those concerns as well. You know, we need to add more programs as available for our men and boys that are being exploited. We see a lot for our women. That's all I want to add.
Thank you, Denise. Deb, would you like to add on?
Yeah, the other thing that I think, okay, so one of the things that I hope people have heard is, you know, it takes a village to raise a child. So we need to stop these nonprofit wars, I call them, that everybody gets worried about duplicating services and who's going to get the money to do this particular thing. And, you know, worrying about us, our populations being the same. Every community, the populations are different. I don't care if it's a Black community, if it's a Native community, if it's a Halifax HRM community, if it's an outside. Our communities all have specifics, so we're never duplicating services. We're not. We can join together and we can enhance the services that we do still need more of. But we need to stop worrying so much about, oh, well, that program has already been financed at such. I feel like sometimes in the nonprofit world that it's like the government just says, okay, here's this little piece of meat and I'm going to throw it in the middle of the room and you guys are going to fight to get your slice because that's all we're giving you. And so then it becomes competition all the time instead of us joining together to reach a common goal. And I think we need to work more at reaching that common goal. What's important to your community, your children, your women, that's what's important. The safety, looking at what's important and how we can do that as a group. Because we all know, learning back to the old stuff, and it's funny because I like a lot of the older things, that one finger cannot push something, but one hand can. So we need to start becoming the fingers on each other's hands and being able to join together, to be able to do things, and stop worrying about, oh, well, this particular organization got more money and this, whatever and whatever. I still get upset because a lot of times I still feel like a token in a lot of situations, and I shouldn't be. There should be more of me and more of us, right? It's okay to have your one Aboriginal person or your one Black person or your one, that's okay. And I appreciate that. I appreciate getting in there, but it's also nice to know that the doors are open for more of us, that they're open for more of us. And because the need is there. I mean, if we're the problem, which in so many cases people say we are, which is, that's here nor there. But if we're the problem, shouldn't we be finding more people in our communities to help find the solution then? It's easy to say we're the problem.
Oh, thank you, Deb. You're not the problem, though. But you know what you mentioned goes right with our next question, because the fourth question is, how can service providers collaborate better to meet the needs of the community? Mm-hmm. Justine, you want to start?
Yeah, so I think I would say it's really important for service providers to communicate with the community.
Mhm.
So what do you need, what do you want? And then once you have that information, take it back and find who can fill what roles, so that you're coming back into our communities, as mentioned already, with like kind of like that wraparound care, right? Most of the individuals that we're working with that come to us, as mentioned, are, you know, maybe it's housing on top of poverty, on top of childcare, on top of, right? The list can easily just go on, mental health, addictions. So if you're really only going to, you know, tackle one head of the Hydra, there's still 3 other heads that we got to deal with, right? So if you're showing up with housing, then great, come with housing, but can we also talk about food security? Can we also talk about, you know, childcare and then employment and, right? I know saying sounds great and is, you know, easier said than done. But that's where the real change is going to come, is, you know, working together rather than in the silos, as Deb has talked about, working together so that we are able to provide that wraparound care, so that they're getting the counseling that they need, but also the food security, but also what this might look like.
Thank you, Justine. Denise, would you like to add on?
My cat behind me, I was like, it gave me a little scare when I saw something there. How about collaboration? So like part of my work too is I do a lot of networking, and I do a lot of collaborating because I'm all about allyship. I'm all about partnership, building those positive relationships. That's a lot to do with my work as a navigator. And I, at the beginning, was feeling like the token Indian. I sometimes don't get asked, like, oh, you know, till afterwards kind of thing, or some other individual. So a lot of times I would address, I can't speak for this organization like Nova Scotia Native Women or the Jane Paul, because they do phenomenal work. They need to be at the table as well. You know, we need to invite our other key knowledge keepers, because we have many knowledge keepers in our community. If it's elders, if it's persons of experience or organizations. I don't want to take that responsibility because it's out of respect for that community. I only could speak on like from the Friendship Center. So I don't want to step on any toes. So I'm seeing now like at TESS, which I'm a big part of, we started the Indigenous Cultural Working Group because I was only seeing me there. I was feeling like, oh, I can't, like, I don't know everything. I'm still learning about, you know, exploitation, and I'm always about learning. So I brought that out. I was like, what about emailing, you know, like Karen Pepto or Karen Bernard or some of the key knowledge keepers that's doing the work. They're now at the table. And I feel like, oh, we can build on the knowledge, we can work better as a team. So we're really collaborating together with, you know, Mi'kmaq Legal Support Network, with INSTE, with Justice Department, Ellen Rainier, plus, you know, other key people, like we even have Senator Dan Christmas, who's got the portfolio to invite to the meeting, because we need government support to fund these programs that we're running. Because, you know, in order for us to continue these programs, and it's so important for these services to exist, we need that funding. We need the, you know, I hate to say the higher ups to be our allies in a sense, so that we can get funding, substantial funding, because we need to address food security, housing, employment. This can go on and on and on. Counseling, trauma work, you know, because I think, you know, with collaboration, we can do beautiful things together, not to be enemies, because we don't want to be competing with one another. We should be working together. And I think we get so much work done if we collaborate more together. And I'm all about collaboration as long as there's a level of respect, but we come with different experiences, different backgrounds, but also, you know, like we, you know, because for the Indigenous and African Nova Scotia, there's differences of knowledge, especially, so we need to be respectful of that. So
Thank you, Denise. Deb, would you like to add on?
Well, I was looking down and people probably were wondering what I was doing. But of course, along with everything else that starts going after a certain age, my sight, even with the bifocals, sometimes it makes it hard to see little things. Because I was looking at the chats, just because, and I know, well, I don't know who's doing, I know that we've been on these a lot, and I didn't even know that there was a little chat option before. So like there's the, and then there's the question thingy, which I hope that we will allow enough time, and if other people that are joining us have questions in particular that they'll be able to ask. Q&As are really important to me, and I love for people to join in and do Q&As. Again, like I said, I just think that having more of us. I remember being in another meeting where it was about, and it was, to do with CPS, and they were talking about cultural differences and how beautiful it was, that people of another culture would be willing to come in and care for our children, because if the children are in need of care, but part of that care is keeping them connected to their cultures. Mm-hmm. Even if you are not yourself, particularly whether it's Aboriginal or Black, that you're not, and we appreciate that you're willing to take a child in need to be there. Do I feel like it's always necessary? No, but that's another whole story. But but if you do decide that you're going to be a person that's willing to do that and care for this child, don't just care for them culturally too. I get a lot of kids who have been totally separated from their cultures. They don't even know how to, what can I say? Don't even know, with my Black children, they don't even know what hair products to use. They never, it seems like a simple thing, but it's not. With my Aboriginal kids, some of them don't even know how to smudge. So if people are going to take the responsibility of being in the communities, then at least learn what's important to the communities and be able to transfer that on. I never learned about healing until I met Duma Young, who basically was the one to start to teach me about the medicine wheel and all of those things that are a very big part of my community. There's also within the hydration ceremony, I believe it is hydration. Yeah, those ceremonies are important. They connect us, and learning about them and providing those things is really, really important. So yeah, I just want to see more of us. I want to, like Justine said, show up. It's okay for us to say, I remembered that I had a really big issue within the education system about these, what do they call them? They're supposed to be learning particular to a kid. What do you call that? I'm sorry, I don't remember, but not transition year program, but something similar to that. And I felt that these kids were like just being separated. Like when I went to Bloomfield School, we had the kids that went into the trailers because they weren't the kids that the teachers were willing to take the time to teach, because they didn't, for whatever reason. I was one of those kids, right? So, so I didn't like this tailored education to that kid, because that's not what it was. I've gone into those classes where the kids were separated. The teacher half the time ain't even in the class. The parent, they just give them a piece of paper and a pencil, or they just hang out. And I think that we need to educate the parents more about what these systems are actually set up to do. There was a big thing about from the pipeline from schools to prisons, right? And as we know, we are much too overrepresented within the prison systems, the justice systems, and because we're not, people don't, they look at us in a way. They don't look at us in the way of how beautiful and how strong. I even have to tell my own kids. What do you mean you don't want to go to school? Do you know how many people died so that you could just be able to read? How many people actually gave up their lives so you could be able to read? And if there's something in school that's not fitting you, come and talk about it. I'll go with you. You know, teachers are just people like everybody else, and they have bad days too. And if you feel like you're in the right, contact me. But then when I said to the parents, come on, let's go. They were like, oh, I'm busy. I don't have childcare. I can't do this. I can't. It was like they were all gung ho. But you put your neck on the chopping block, Deb. We're not going to do that. And I think getting away from that and learning that, you know, that all of our voices have value and that we're all important and all of these issues are for all of us is really important. I don't even want to tell you how sometimes that I had to end up, you know, through the healthcare and how I was treated differently, you know, or, you know, because, of course, because of the way I looked, I must be coming here for drugs, or I must have put myself in the situation. You know, and when we're talking about sexual violence, I remembered one of my rapes because I have had times when I've been a multiple victim, that about 2 weeks before that, my cousin got raped. I remembered hearing things like the trial and stuff and how they were so busy making it her fault. She had on a mini skirt, she wasn't a virgin, and re-victimizing her throughout this time. I had to take one of the young ladies that I work with, and everyone knows like what my population is, although I have many populations, but a woman in the sex trade. And once they assumed that that's what she was, they told us it was going to take 6 hours for the same nurse to come. Like, you're going to have to wait 6 hours. The police said, you're going to have to call someone else to come and sit with her because we're not sitting here for 6 hours. Okay, and this woman was kidnapped, basically. Well, she went where she was going, but once she got there, then she didn't realize the danger she had put herself in. You know, she thought she was cool with these people. 3 days later, after being raped multiple times, she got away. And like, so she had been traumatized for days and days at a time, and probably for some trauma that would last her for the rest of her life. Then we get to emergency and we're re-traumatized, right? And it's happened to me, it's happened to a lot of people that were re-traumatized, because again, our communities are very overly sexualized. Okay, we're like the exotics. You know, well, we got to be more apt to sex. We got to be better at sex. We got to want more sex because we were sexually like such a sexual object for so long a time that a lot of people think that way about us. It's like we're less than, but still we're more than in a way, you know? And I can tell you that even through the escort service, like they would call and ask, what else did they have? Like they were ordering I don't know, like a flavor of ice cream or something, you know, and it had gotten to the point where nobody wanted vanilla. Everybody wanted banana or chocolate, because we're supposed to be better at that, because everyone knows women with melanin are hornier than anybody else anyway. That's how you know, I don't know how else to put it, but that's what the assumption is. We're the exotics, we're the bed wenches, we're the, you know, we're the Pocahontases, we're all of those things, which really, I think that getting people to understand that we're women like every other woman, and, you know, and that, you know, no, we don't grow up differently. I was asked that once, like by a person in Cape Breton, to ask me, like, do you guys take, and I couldn't believe it, not in this day and age that people are so uneducated. Something about having babies and at what age do we start our period? Like, is it different from them? Do we start younger? Is that why we all have our babies so young? And all these things. And I couldn't believe it. And she wasn't being rude, honestly and truly. I could not believe that she felt that because of my melanin, that my anatomy was different than hers. And really thought it. She was like, she was way back in some place called Balls Creek, which was really Cape Breton. She had never been exposed much to any people other than Caucasian people. And for her, she felt like with that, our anatomy was different. Like we become sexual younger, and we become our, being able to reproduce younger. And I'm like, I can't believe it. And like I said, I'm a pretty good detector is when someone's just being rude or when they're actually not educated. So yeah, no, I mean, just even like letting people know our anatomy is no different than yours, darling. Yeah, our maturity is no different. No, we don't have our babies younger. It's just that most of the time our babies stay within our families as much as we can do that. So yes, we don't have a unwed mother's home for us specifically, because most of our kids get taken by family members, like somewhere along the way. So yeah, I think, like I said, it's all about education and not being afraid to ask the questions that are the elephant in the room. Like I know a lot of people that don't know would like to know, but they're afraid to ask because they're afraid to offend people. They're afraid that, oh, well, how do I put this question without causing a problem? And, and thinking like that. So if non-melanated people need a place to ask questions that they're worried that they might get some flack for, I think maybe we need to look at doing something like that. Like here's a space that white people can ask whatever questions they want and nobody's gonna beat them up. So, but I'm sorry, I'm not that academic or articulate, but yeah, because a lot of people want to know, like if you didn't grow up in that neighborhood and you may not know, you know what I mean? This is a place where you can come and safely ask the questions that people are afraid to ask. Right?
Thank you for sharing. I know our time's running out.
I know.
But I wanted to ask all you, first of all, I want to say thank you again. And this conversation has been meaningful to me. I hope the people that are watching enjoyed it, but I really do appreciate you guys from the bottom of my heart. You guys know that. I hope you know that. But I want to ask one more question, and you can answer with a quick sentence and then a goodbye. What would you like to share about this work for newcomers coming into this work? Because this is work that a lot of people say they want to go to school to do, or they're in school to do this type of work. What is one thing you would like to share? Because you guys have years of experience. What is something you would like to share for the newcomers coming into this work? One quick sentence, and then we'll wrap it up.
A quick sentence.
I guess I can go. I want them to look at the MMIW final report, Calls of Justice. Read that report, because a lot of that, especially around sexual violence exploitation, is 3.4 and 4.3. Read the calls of action. That's about reconciliation. That's about work that needs to be done.
Thank you, Denise.
I would say to look at the breakthesilenceNS.ca. It's a 7, I think they're working on the 8th module right now. It's all around sexual violence prevention. It talks about everything from consent to self-care to the African Nova Scotia perspective, the Indigenous perspective. It talks about intersectionality and checking your privilege and your biases. Like it's all in there. It's a great place to start. And really make sure that you are constantly self-checking yourself, because this work can get really heavy. If you're in this line of work, you're probably here because you want to help others. And sometimes we're not always able to help others. And, having that realization earlier on rather than after, you've tried really hard and did not succeed in the way that you wanted to, Make sure that you do a constant self-check of your self-care, your mental health, and how you're doing in the work.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Shar.
Justine.
Love you too.
Just my one sentence, that when you're in this type of work, when you've chosen this type of work, for whatever reason you have, mine was very simple, it fit for me. It was very simple. It's like, what have I learned over the years? Where have I learned it? How can I apply this? And I was always a big firm believer in the Sons when it says, if you can't find the person, be the person. So mine is just being the person, right? But self-care. So if you're going to deal with a lot of your own demons before, and they're going to come after you, that stuff that you never even thought that you were damaged by or traumatized by, and they're going to be in your face. So get ready for that, and make sure that your preparation is self-care. What do I do at this time? I mean, most people that go into this line of work, they do it because they care. They do it because they put themselves on the back burner, whether it be with family members, with community, whatever. It was always about the other person first, and always taking care of themselves last. And so, but we can't go back to the old thing that says, if the plane's going down, whose oxygen mask do you put on first? Right? And because there are so few of us, and because the workload is so heavy, put on that oxygen mask. Put on the oxygen mask and do the self-care. I tell myself that more and more because I'm trying to learn it, right? Because it's not something I ever learned. I learned about caring for other people, not about self-care, right? And that,
Thank you, Deb.
yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, you're more than welcome. And I want to say thank you very much for inviting me to this.
Yes, thanks, Shar.
Yeah, I think you picked a great panel here. And I want to say thank you.
Oh, thank you guys for showing up. Thank you guys for showing up. This means a lot. And everybody stay safe, okay?
All right.
Yes.
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 Okay,
Thank you,
well,
everyone.
I'll see you guys soon, hopefully.
Yes.
Yes. For sure.